Right now, two nuclear-armed nations share a highly volatile border. They possess absolutely zero formal arms control treaties with each other.
None at all.
Yeah, none. And they have a history of active military conflict, plus their arsenals are, rapidly expanding. Yet, one of those nations claims to be the world's loudest, most principled advocate for total global nuclear disarmament.
It's quite the contradiction.
It really is. So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking you inside this massive geopolitical paradox, which is India's complex and, frankly, seemingly contradictory stance on nuclear weapons. And look, if you're gearing up for a high-level policy debate or, prepping for an exam, this is a war room briefing for you. We're going to give you the mental framework to deconstruct this issue.
Yeah, and we really have to deconstruct it, because this isn't just some abstract history lesson. When we talk about nuclear doctrine in South Asia, we're literally talking about global survival.
Right. The stakes are that high.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the collateral damage of even a limited nuclear exchange in this region wouldn't just be the immediate horrific loss of life, which would be bad enough. We have to look at the atmospheric models of a nuclear winter.
The environmental impact?
Exactly. Even a fraction of these arsenals detonating could send enough soot into the stratosphere to basically block sunlight for years.
Wow.
Yeah, it would cause a massive drop in global temperatures. You'd see a total collapse of global agriculture. So understanding how India manages its arsenal and, why it builds weapons while preaching disarmament is arguably one of the most pressing climate and survival issues of our time.
Which immediately raises the stakes for anyone listening. We aren't just talking about border skirmishes. We're talking about the mechanisms that keep the planet functional.
Precisely.
So let's jump into that glaring contradiction. If India is so committed to global disarmament, what exactly is their foundational philosophy? Like, how do they justify having the bomb in the first place?
Well, to really grasp the justification, you have to look at the two foundational pillars of India's nuclear posture. There's the no first use policy, or NFU, and their absolute refusal to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT.
Okay, so I've heard of no first use, but what does that actually mean on the ground? Is it just like a diplomatic promise, or does it change how the military physically operates?
It fundamentally changes their operational reality. I mean, no first use is exactly what it sounds like. India pledges never to be the first to introduce nuclear weapons into a conflict.
So they wait to get hit.
Right. They reserve them strictly for retaliation. But mechanically, think about what that requires of a nation. If you promise to absorb a nuclear strike first, your entire nuclear infrastructure has to be designed to survive that initial attack.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, your command and control centers, your communication lines, your launch silos, they all have to be hardened and hidden. It signals to the world that your arsenal is purely defensive. But, it is an incredibly expensive and technologically demanding posture to actually maintain.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You have to build a system robust enough to take a punch and still hit back. But then we get to that second pillar you mentioned, their refusal to sign the NPT.
Right, the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
I always look at the NPT as sort of like a discriminatory VIP club. You have the bouncers at the door, which are the P5 nations, the permanent members of the UN Security Council like the US, Russia, China. And they get to stay heavily armed inside the club.
Right, they keep their weapons.
But everyone else.
Yeah.
They have to be completely searched and disarmed before they're even allowed in. Is that essentially why India refuses to sign? Because they don't want to give up their leverage?
That analogy is actually spot on. The mechanics of the NPT dictate that only countries that manufactured and exploded a nuclear weapon prior to January 1st, 1967 are officially recognized as nuclear weapon states.
Just an arbitrary date.
Exactly, an arbitrary historical cutoff date. India views this as structurally flawed and deeply hypocritical. They argue that it creates this world of nuclear haves and have-nots,
Right.
where a few nations hold the ultimate security guarantee while preaching vulnerability to everyone else. So India's refusal isn't about wanting to be a rogue state. It's about preserving strategic autonomy.
But how do they navigate the global backlash of that? I mean, if you refuse to sign the premier non-proliferation treaty on the planet, doesn't the international community just look at you as a rogue actor anyway?
Well, that's where India employs what strategists call the dual approach. And it's a really brilliant tightrope walking piece of statecraft.
How so?
So, on one hand, they are modernizing their arsenal to secure their borders, but on the other hand, they voluntarily abide by the rules of the global security architecture, even though they're outside the official treaties. For instance, look at their participation in the Wassenaar Arrangement and the Australia Group.
Wait, the Wassenaar, what? I'm not familiar with those. What do those groups actually do?
They're multilateral export control regimes. The Wassenaar Arrangement focuses on conventional arms and dual-use goods and technologies,
Dual use mean?
meaning things that have civilian applications but could be used for military purposes, like specialized carbon fiber or advanced computing. The Australia Group does something similar but for chemical and biological weapons.
Okay, got it.
By joining these groups, India is proving to the world that they have airtight export controls. They're showing that even though they have nuclear weapons and advanced tech, they will never let that technology leak to rogue states or non-state actors. It proves they're a responsible power, which mitigates the fact that they sit outside the NPT.
So their message is basically, we won't join your discriminatory club, but we'll play by the club's safety rules better than some of the actual members.
Exactly.
But, let me push back on this purely defensive posture for a second. If they're playing by the rules, and their doctrine is strictly retaliatory, why are we seeing them rapidly develop things like submarine-launched ballistic missiles?
Right.
Why this massive technological push if the goal is just to sit quietly with the defensive deterrent?
Well, because you have to look at the map. The geography of India's threat matrix is uniquely hostile. They are dealing with the China-Pakistan nexus.
A two-front problem.
Exactly. And this isn't just a matter of having two neighbors who occasionally cause border skirmishes. This is a deep, structural, dual-front threat. China is currently undergoing one of the most rapid and massive nuclear modernizations in history.
Expanding their warheads and delivery systems.
Yes, very aggressively. And at the same time, China is the primary military and technological backer of Pakistan.
That is a staggering security dilemma. But wait, during the Cold War, the U.S. and the Soviet Union had thousands of weapons pointed at each other, but they also had guardrails, right?
Right, they did.
They had the famous red telephones, the hotlines.
Yeah.
They spent decades negotiating the SALT and START treaties to cap their arsenals and build an inspection mechanisms. What does the arms control framework look like between India, China, and Pakistan?
It essentially doesn't exist.
None at all.
None. There are no formal bilateral arms control treaties between India and its nuclear neighbors capping warheads or establishing verified inspection regimes. The Cold War adversaries had that terrifying near miss with the Cuban Missile Crisis, which scared them into building those guardrails.
Right. It forced their hand.
But South Asia operates without that structural safety net. There is no formal mechanism to build trust or manage risks if a conventional skirmish escalates.
That is genuinely terrifying. I mean, the margin for error or miscalculation in a border dispute seems incredibly thin.
Extremely thin. And that absence of guardrails brings us back to your question about why India is building submarine-launched ballistic missiles, specifically the K-4 missile system.
Okay, tie that together for me.
Remember the no-first-use policy we discussed? If you are India and you have zero arms control treaties with a rapidly arming China and a highly volatile Pakistan, your retaliatory strike must be absolutely guaranteed.
Right, because if they hit your land bases.
Exactly. Land-based silos can be targeted. Airfields can be bombed. But a nuclear-powered submarine hidden deep in the ocean is almost impossible to track and destroy in a first strike.
Oh, wow.
Developing the K-4 SLBM completes India's nuclear triad. That's the ability to launch from land, air, and sea. It ensures that no matter how devastating an initial attack on India might be, a submarine will survive to deliver a catastrophic counterstrike.
That makes total sense now.
Yeah, that guaranteed survival is the actual mechanism that deters the enemy from attacking in the first place.
So the submarine isn't an offensive escalation. It's like the ultimate insurance policy for the no-first-use doctrine. It makes the threat of retaliation credible.
Perfectly stated.
But let's look at the cracks in the strategy, because no strategy is perfect. If I'm looking at the reality on the ground, the no-first-use doctrine seems incredibly rigid. Are strategists inside India universally supportive of this? Or is the doctrine facing scrutiny?
Oh, it is facing intense, fierce scrutiny. And that's primarily because of how the threat from Pakistan is evolving. Pakistan has developed what we call tactical nuclear weapons, specifically the Nasr missile system.
How does a tactical weapon differ from, like, a standard nuclear weapon?
It's all about yield and target. Strategic nuclear weapons are massive. They are designed to wipe out entire cities and industrial centers.
Like the Cold War era weapons.
Right. But tactical nuclear weapons have a much smaller explosive yield. They are designed for use on a battlefield against advancing troops or tank columns. And Pakistan's military doctrine essentially says that if Indian conventional forces cross the border in a major conflict, Pakistan will not hesitate to use a small tactical nuke on their own soil to destroy the advancing Indian military.
Wait, on their own soil?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that completely breaks the logic of India's doctrine. If Pakistan pops a small tactical nuke on a battlefield just to stop some tanks, and India's no first use doctrine dictates a massive punishing retaliation, what does India do? Do they wipe out a major Pakistani city in response to a battlefield skirmish?
That is exactly the dilemma. It's called an asymmetric conflict scenario. If India responds with a massive strategic strike, they trigger a full-scale nuclear apocalypse.
Right.
But if they do nothing, their deterrence is exposed as a bluff. So strategists argue that India's rigid no-first-use policy might actually encourage Pakistan to engage in lower-level conventional terrorism or limited strikes.
Because they know India won't risk the apocalypse over something small.
Exactly. They know India's nuclear threshold is too high to be a credible deterrent against smaller provocations.
That is a massive operational headache. You have a rigid doctrine colliding with a highly flexible, chaotic threat. But, it's not just the external military threats that challenge India's posture. I came across some data regarding India's domestic nuclear security that completely surprised me.
You're talking about the NTI index?
Yes, the Nuclear Threat Initiative Index. It ranked India incredibly low regarding nuclear material security. Can you explain what that index measures and why it actually matters?
Sure. The NTI Nuclear Security Index is a globally recognized assessment of how well countries protect their nuclear materials from theft, sabotage, and unauthorized access. And you're right, it is a glaring vulnerability for India. In a recent iteration, India ranked 20th out of 22 countries possessing weapons-usable nuclear materials.
20th out of 22. I mean, that is not the ranking of a country claiming to be the gold standard of responsible nuclear stewardship. What exactly is driving that low score?
It really comes down to institutional and regulatory gaps. The index measures things like the physical security facilities, insider threat prevention, cybersecurity measures, and the independence of the regulatory bodies overseeing the nuclear program.
So it's about governance.
Exactly. A low ranking suggests that while India's diplomatic posture is responsible, the physical and bureaucratic safeguards protecting their highly enriched uranium and plutonium are viewed by the international community as porous or just inadequately regulated.
Man, how does a ranking like that impact India globally? I have to imagine that when India goes to the international community and says, hey, we want access to advanced technology, trust us, their adversaries just point to the NTI index and say, you can't even secure your own facilities.
You've hit the nail on the head. That reputational damage feeds directly into the massive diplomatic blockades India faces, most notably with the Nuclear Suppliers Group, or the NSG.
Let's break down the NSG, because if you're taking notes, you definitely need to understand this part. What is the NSG, and why does India need to be in it?
The NSG is a multilateral export control regime. It's a group of nuclear supplier countries that try to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons through guidelines for nuclear exports. Basically, if you want to buy advanced nuclear technology, uranium fuel, or heavy machinery for civil nuclear power plants, you need the NSG's approval.
Got it.
Now, in 2008, India secured a historic one-time waiver from the NSG that was largely pushed by the United States, and it allowed India to engage in global nuclear commerce despite not signing the NPT.
So they got the waiver. Why isn't that enough? Why are they still fighting so hard for full membership?
Because a waiver is just a permission slip. Membership means you help write the rules. As a full member, India would have a permanent seat at the table to shape global nuclear commerce. And it would guarantee its own long-term energy security without relying on ad hoc exceptions. But their membership is actively blocked.
Let me guess. China.
Precisely. And China uses a very clever procedural argument. They don't just say, we hate India. They say, look, the NSG is for NPT signatories. If we're going to make an exception and let India in, then we must also let Pakistan in. China intentionally links India's bid to Pakistan's parallel bid, and they know full well that the international community will never admit Pakistan.
Because of their track record.
Exactly, due to its history of nuclear proliferation, specifically the AQ Khan network, which illegally sold nuclear tech to North Korea and Iran.
That is incredibly cynical, but strategically brilliant. So China tethers India to Pakistan's bad reputation, effectively freezing India out of the highest tier of global tech sharing. But wait, if India is locked out of the NSG and they face severe supply chain bottlenecks for their civilian energy needs, how are they keeping the lights on? Because India has massive climate goals and a soaring energy demand.
Well, that diplomatic blockade forces India to turn inward, which drives their current domestic push for indigenous nuclear technology. They are currently scaling up the design and construction of 700-megawatt electric pressurized heavy water reactors, or PHWRs.
Okay, mark that down if you're listening. The 700 milliwi PHWRs.
Yeah.
But why that specific technology? Why heavy water reactors instead of the standard reactors you see in other countries?
It comes entirely down to supply chain independence. Standard light water reactors, which are common globally, require enriched uranium fuel. Because India is outside the major global supply chains, accessing enriched uranium is politically complicated and very expensive.
Okay.
Heavy water reactors, on the other hand, can run on natural, unenriched uranium, which India actually mines domestically. The heavy water acts as both a coolant and a neutron moderator, so it allows the natural uranium to sustain a fission chain reaction.
So the physics of the reactor are entirely dictated by the geopolitics of their isolation.
Exactly. By mastering the 700 milliwi PHWR design, India bypasses the need for foreign enrichment services. But doing this entirely in-house requires advanced metallurgy, precision manufacturing, and massive capital. It's a grueling technological hurdle. But it is the only way India can expand its baseload clean energy to meet its climate commitments without being held hostage by global supply chain politics.
Man, so we've mapped out the entire architecture here. We have the foundational paradox of the NPT refusal and the no first use doctrine. We have the two-front threat matrix driving the development of the K-4 submarine-launched missiles. We have the operational nightmare of Pakistan's tactical nukes, the reputational hit of the NTI index ranking 20th out of 22, and the diplomatic blockade at the NSG pushing India toward indigenous heavy water reactors.
That's the full picture.
Right. So if you had to brief someone on how India navigates a way forward, like how they actually solve these interconnected problems, what does that roadmap look like?
The roadmap has to rely on institutional strengthening and what we call peaceful tech diplomacy. First, to counter that reputational damage of the NTI index, India needs to proactively enhance its verification and security methodologies by collaborating even more closely with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency.
They need to be transparent.
Right. India needs to invite best practice reviews and publicly shore up its regulatory frameworks. You have to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that your domestic security is bulletproof.
Show, don't just tell.
Exactly. Second, India needs to leverage its civilian nuclear advancements for global goodwill. If they master these indigenous reactors or advance their work in medical isotopes and agricultural radiation technology, they should heavily export those peaceful applications to the global south. It builds immense diplomatic leverage and trust.
Okay, but what about their neighborhood? We often hear international relations experts suggest that the region should establish a South Asian nuclear weapon-free zone, an NWFZ.
Yeah.
But given everything we just discussed about China's rapid modernization and Pakistan's tactical battlefield nukes, is pushing for an NWFZ actually realistic, or is that just pure diplomatic theater?
It's an excellent question, and it highlights the friction between idealism and statecraft. Is a South Asian NWFZ going to be signed tomorrow? Absolutely not. China and Pakistan would never agree to neutralize their strategic leverage.
Right, why would they?
They wouldn't. However, India continuously advocating for it is not just empty posturing. It is calculated strategic messaging. By formally proposing these frameworks at the UN, India forces its adversaries to be the ones who publicly reject peace. It puts the diplomatic burden on China and Pakistan to explain why they won't disarm, which reinforces India's image as the responsible, reluctant nuclear power.
It totally flips the script on the international stage.
Yes, it does. But ultimately, if we step back and look at the whole architectural blueprint of India's policy, we have to recognize a larger governance pattern.
Okay.
India's development of the K-4 submarine missiles and those indigenous 700-megawatt reactors aren't just isolated military or energy projects. They represent a structural national shift toward Atmanard for Bharat, which translates to self-reliance. It's the pursuit of total strategic autonomy. They are linking national security directly to technological transformation and climate resilience, all while trying to survive in the most hostile nuclear neighborhood on Earth.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. So for anyone listening who needs to synthesize this for a policy debate or an exam, let's pull all of this together into a structured 250-word answer format. If you're writing this down, grab a pen.
Perfect. Let's break it down.
First, you establish the context. India's unique position of staying outside the discriminatory NPT, yet playing by global non-proliferation rules like the Wassenaar Arrangement.
Right.
Second, the dimensions. The balancing act of the no first use doctrine versus the necessity of guaranteed second strike survival, like the K-4 submarine program.
Exactly.
Third, the challenges. You've got the China-Pakistan military nexus, the asymmetric threat of tactical nukes like the Nasser, the diplomatic blockade at the NSG by China, and the domestic security gaps highlighted by the NTI index.
That's the core threat matrix.
And finally, the recommendations, or the way forward. Deepening IAEA compliance, pushing indigenous tech like the heavy water reactors for climate goals, and using peaceful tech diplomacy to build global leverage.
That is exactly how you connect the dots. You cannot look at a missile launch or a reactor construction in a vacuum. You have to see how it moves the needle on India's global standing and strategic independence.
Absolutely. Okay, let's do a rapid-fire final revision capsule. Let's hit the 5 must-remember facts.
Okay, 1, the no first use doctrine. 2, refusal to sign the discriminatory NPT. 3, ranking 20th out of 22 on the NTI Security Index. 4, development of the K-4 submarine-launched ballistic missile for second strike capability. And 5, NSG membership being blocked by China.
Perfect. And here are your 5 analytical keywords to underline in your analysis. Strategic autonomy, dual approach, credible deterrence, asymmetric conflict, and discriminatory regime.
Excellent summary.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, but before we wrap up, let's bring it back to where we started, the sheer existential weight of this topic.
Right. I really want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We began by talking about the atmospheric models of a nuclear winter, how smoke from a regional exchange could literally collapse global agriculture. Given that there are still no formal arms control treaties, no red telephones, and no verified guardrails between India, Pakistan, and China, while all three are rapidly expanding their capabilities, is South Asian nuclear diplomacy really just a regional border issue? Or is the stability of this specific region actually the single most pressing global climate and environmental security issue of our time?
Wow, that completely reframes how you look at the map. It is a chilling reality, but what we all need to be profoundly aware of. Keep questioning these frameworks, keep looking for the mechanics behind the headlines, and keep digging deeper. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.